That just barely fits on that screen, doesn't it? That's all right. It's my only slide. So yes, my name is Tom Preston Werner. I am the co-founder and CTO of a company called Github. Github is a place for web developers or desktop developers or security developers, really any kind of developer, to share code with their colleagues, with the world via open source. If you just go to github.com, you can read about it. It uses a distributed version control system called Git that is the same version control system that is used by the Linux kernel to help all of the Linux core developers figure out what everyone else is doing. Everyone can make changes in their own little sphere of influence and then merge those up into what is called the master. And from the master then, a version of the Linux kernel is rolled. So this is a very powerful system that allows people, wherever they are, to make commits. The nice thing about a distributed version control system like Git is that you can make commits from anywhere, including an airplane, because you're only committing to your local computer. It gives you a lot of power that way. Every repository as well contains full history. This gives you a lot of power for communicating with the repository locally. So this is why you can commit on an airplane, because all of the history of that project is local. So if you haven't heard of Git, or you're not using Git, definitely check it out, because it contains a lot of things that can make you more efficient and can help your team collaborate better. But I'm not really here to talk about GitHub so much. You can go and discover that on your own. I was asked here to talk a little bit more about how GitHub came about, because we have a bit of an interesting story, one that a lot of people find compelling. So, what's interesting about GitHub is that we started as a side project about 2.5 years ago. I was working at a place called PowerSet. PowerSet did ostensibly Wikipedia search using semantic analysis of the documentation. PowerSet was eventually acquired by Microsoft for $100 million, so it was a successful place to be at the time. I actually left when it was acquired by Microsoft to work on GitHub full-time. So let me tell you a little bit about how that happened and how I made that decision to leave a safe place like Microsoft with some of the best benefits in the world and a really big retention bonus to work on a little project on the side. So what's nice about a side project is that you can do it while you're working somewhere else. I'm the kind of person that is always working on some kind of side project. So this is a conference about the web. And the web is the perfect place to do a side project because the cost of entering is so low. You can start a side project, a website, something that interests you. You can start that today for as much as it costs a simple server. And really, that's all you need at first. Because whatever you build, if you do it on the side, do it small. Take your time. You're probably only putting in time after work, maybe weekends, whatever you can spare. So start small and don't think it has to be big right away. There's nothing wrong with growing really slowly. So GitHub started as an idea. I was at one of the Ruby meetups in San Francisco. I would often go to them. And I met this guy named Chris Wanstroth. And we were both using Git for some open source projects. And we kind of had a problem where we wanted to work on these projects together, but there was no good way to send the files, the repository files, back and forth, which is a big problem because the whole point of a distributed version control system is that it's easy to share and collaborate on stuff together. But their model was, the Linux kernel model, which was really the biggest project and one of the only ones using it 3 years ago, they did all of their work through a mailing list. And patches would come in through the mailing list, they would apply them. Now, in the current age of software development, We're not using mailing lists quite so much. We're probably using Gmail. We're not using the old listservs. We're not using Mutt or Pine as our mail user agent. And it's really not that great of a way to work with software, I think, in a very fast, iterative way. Maybe it's okay for really big projects where there needs to be a lot of inspection and talk about every commit. But for smaller projects, and especially open source projects getting started, you need a really fast, agile way to do this. So what we did is we started on a website, because this is what we were. We were web developers. And we just started on the side. Every night I'd get home from work, I'd plop down on the bed, I'd start working on a library that allowed me to inspect Git repositories from the Ruby language. Just making a library to get information from the repository onto a web page. And this is how it started. Chris and I, just in our spare time, working on this little website. The key here is start small and iterate. Pick one little feature that you can implement, and then grow it from there. Add another one. Add another one. But probably the most important thing is to get it out in front of people. And this is why I think that stealth mode is bullshit. PowerSet, the company where I was working at the time, had a very stealth mode kind of philosophy. We would never show people what we were doing. It was always, wait until it's perfect. Then we'll blow some minds and everyone will love it. But guess what, if you do that, you'll probably never blow any minds because no one will ever see it. And by the time you have anything at all, it'll be wrong. You probably won't be building what people actually want because you waited too long. You get in this little internal mindset of, hey, we know what's the best for everyone, but you don't. You don't. Every time we do something on GitHub and put it out in the open, which we do constantly, people have feedback, and we have to change things. If you build 100 features on top of one mistake, now you've got 100 features to unravel and redo. So get out in the open as soon as possible, especially with your side projects. It's not worth it to keep those hidden. Maybe there's one or two things here and there where it could be beneficial. But for the most part, get it in front of people's eyes. It could be very, very small. As long as it does one thing that's better than what everyone else is using, people will use it. And they'll give you tons of feedback about it because they are probably going to be having the same kinds of problems that you are. And that's what we found, is that people were starting to figure out that Git was this pretty cool system, and yet there was no decent way to work on it with other people. So we fix a problem for ourselves, we fix it for a bunch of other people too. Now, I also did a startup, not really a startup, another side project called Gravatar. You might recognize that from those little icons that are next to blog posts everywhere. I did that by myself. I was doing some consulting at the time, and I would stare up at my ceiling every morning trying to figure out how I could contribute to the ecosystem of weblogs and web standards. I had recently read Jeffrey Zeldman's book, and I desperately wanted to be part of that culture of people who were building things for the web in a standard way and get these people's attention. I was I hadn't really done a whole lot before that anyone would know of. I didn't do any open source. So I was looking for a way into that world. And I came up with this idea for Gravatars, right? Just a little thing attached to your email address, a hash, an MD5 hash of your email address, that people could then look up and grab this image. Now, one of the big problems with how I did this was I worked alone and I didn't have a lot of feedback from anyone. So here's another problem with not having feedback. And this is not feedback from the community, but feedback from someone who's going to prevent you from making stupid mistakes. And there's a huge, huge, huge amount of value in that. Working with Chris initially on GitHub was really quite a revelation for me because I'd never done anything like that before. And as long as you find someone good, someone that thinks like you do, that is as passionate about what you're doing as you are, they're going to prevent you from making a lot of really bad mistakes. I think we've all seen this before, but when we're faced with a problem, we'll think of a few solutions and we'll pick one of them pretty rapidly without thinking about it too much.